Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Kevin Sansberry II, a behavioral scientist, podcast host of Toxic Leadership, and executive coach whose inspiring work is driven by the need for evidence-based, inclusive, and equitable approaches to urgently and proactively transform and coach leaders, eradicating toxic behaviors that threaten profitability, innovation, and the overall well-being. Kevin is an impactful executive coach focused on providing research-informed solutions in various settings such as professional sports, higher education, nonprofit, sales, and other large complex organizations. He's also the founder and principal of Kevra Consulting, a firm that utilizes research-based solutions to address organizational challenges such as inclusion, equity, and belonging, HR strategy, and leadership coaching and development. Well, welcome, Kevin. How did you discover your passion or niche?
I think it came about due to the fact that when I was working in human resources, what I cared most about was the human part and less about like payroll. And I mean, payroll's like super important, right? But the working in the human part was it just fed my, filled my cup, I guess I would say, and fed my passion. And when I say the human part, I'm talking about well-being. I'm talking about individuals feeling like they're fulfilled at work. I'm talking about people feeling like they're treated fairly at work. I'm talking about people not being othered at work. And so that's really where my areas of focus are and, how I discovered it.
Amazing. And a large part of having fulfillment in our work or enjoying our work stems from the leaders that we have the privilege of working with.
Certainly.
So based on your trajectory of your success, what would you say are some traits or characteristics of leaders or mentors that have influenced your success? Whether it's in a way where you're like, man, like one day I want to adopt these attributes, or on the flip side, you're like, I'm going to stay very far away from this.
One of my favorite leadership lessons was I had a leader that I worked really closely with, and we had kind of like different ways of processing information, different ways of communication, different ways of running projects. And I'm an introvert. I like to be given direction, but not told what to do. And then I like to go build something humongous. Well, she didn't do that. She liked to talk to people and build things as she goes. And so I remember one time, this is like when we were first starting to work together, she was telling me about this idea she had. She was talking to me about it. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And she was like, we should do something like that this summer. And I said, okay. So I went and built the thing. I built it. And I kind of was like, okay, here's what I think it could look like. And here's the steps we could take, yada, yada, yada. Well, she's more so well, that was just a brainstorm. I didn't want you to build it. I wanted to talk it through because that's how she works, And I remember her mentioning that she had to, she learned, and she learned about how I work and, adapt it to hey, don't go build this, it's just, I'm just talking, and I'm I thought I was delivering something you wanted, and so I had her best interest in mind or what have you. And, we both were working with positive intent or what have you. But that could have went sideways. It could have went to a situation where she viewed me negatively or something like that. But instead, she learned how to embrace my strengths and my gifts for the better. And I think that behavior as a leader was something that took a lot of emotional intelligence from her on her behalf. And it also took a bit of trust on my behalf to know that, she wasn't judging me based off of I work differently than her, So that was a really helpful experience to learn at a younger age, because that's how I kind of started treating my employees, very individualistic as it relates to looking for gifts, as it relates to looking for what makes people tick. That's kind of something I tell people I'm doing. I just want to know what makes you tick. So I ask a lot of why questions. I ask why do they do things a certain way? What do you think about this? And I ask those questions really deeply because just like any friendships that I have and personal relationships I have, I kind of don't want surface level relationships. I want deep relationships. And what that's going to do is it does create a longer time horizon as it relates to whatever relationship you're in. But I truly want to know somebody at that level. And so people that reported to me historically and or people that I work with now reporting to me or whatever, what have you, I'm asking those deeper questions because I want to know how people think, because I want them to operate into how they think and not operate into how I think.
Well, that's a beautiful example that you shared there because I think back to my career as well. And I think in those moments when both your leader and yourself, because you guys both took accountability for that situation, understanding, hey, I'm a doer. Like, if I hear, like, this is what you want, I'm going to execute for you. Right.
Hmm.
And then she's more so, hold up. Now I know how to clarify
Yep.
what it is that I'm looking for. And I think that is so important because as people who are reporting leaders, cannot always guess what it is that
Yeah.
the leader actually wants, right?
Correct. That is correct.
And based on your approach of tailoring how you lead people, it leads to sustainable change. And I think it really helps people thrive, which kind of brings me into your zone of genius, which is
Hmm.
when it comes to sustainable change and systemic change in general, you leverage behavior science.
Hmm.
So, one of the questions I have for you is how do you move from surviving to thriving and creating sustainable behavioral change as a leader?
Wow, I love that question. So the notions of surviving and thriving are there are proxies you can measure to say, hey, this person is surviving, or hey, this person's thriving, but you really can't measure survival and thriving directly. And so, related to those aspects, some of the things we look at as it relates to like the behavior piece, some of the things you're going to see are when someone is in a survival mode, they're going to be really attuned to safety. They're going to be really attuned to comfort because they're already feeling like they're in a state where they have to survive. And so sometimes people are dysregulated psychologically. And so you're going to start seeing behaviors that don't, like, I'm not going to take a risk. Why would I take a risk if I'm in survival mode? I don't, I already feel like I'm in harm's way. So you're not going to see a lot of innovation. You're not going to see a lot of risk taking. You're going to see a lot of assimilation. Potentially you'll see a lot of behaviors that are conforming behaviors. People want to kind of shrink down sometimes when they're in survival mode. On the flip side, there are others who you might see folks get larger in presence and lash out a little more, and or they're, it's like the fight or flight. They're fighting. You might see a little bit of the fight behavior in survival mode, and so you could take that and just place it into whatever context you would want to place it in. But that's kind of what you're going to see behaviorally if I had to categorize it a little bit. Now, on the flip side, and I think explaining what you would see in thriving will help you also see what you see in surviving. But I think thriving proxies you would see in certain behaviors you could see are, you will see risk taking, you will see innovation, you're going to see entrepreneurial mindset, meaning people are going to be taking the business as their own in their mind. They're going to like think ahead, they're going to be like thinking about contingencies. You're going to see a lot of that behavior because I feel comfortable. I'm good. I'm in my bag. I'm in my flow state. You know what I'm saying? And so with that thriving mode, you're unlocking a set of freedom cognitively that people normally don't access because they don't feel like they can. And so thriving is correlated, I guess I will say, with what we describe as the flow state. You'll be in that flow state, and so you'll see folks doing work, doing their role and things like that, but coming up with new ideas how to make it better, going above and beyond. And it's like we always want above and beyond, and yet we put people in surviving states, or we put people in conditions that elicit survival states. Because I'm also, from a behavioral standpoint, I'm going to be very clear when I say this. I'm going to try to be. No one can cause your survival state. You cause your survival state. A stimuli, or environment that is external from you may contribute to it, elicit to it, and stuff like that. But things happen to us. We are not the things that happen to us.
Thank you for sharing that because as you were saying that, it kind of made me think of a previous conversation I had where they were saying that when you're not in a psychologically safe environment,
Hmm.
it's really hard for you to figure out how you can advocate and then thrive because of the fact that there's no trust, right? And all that. So as you touch on some of these things, what have you noticed are one of the biggest challenges that leaders encounter when it comes to creating an environment where when you're not just stuck in survival mode all the time?
Hmm.
Like, what are some of the systemic issues there?
a lack of accountability is one of the biggest ones. And what that means in this context is the notion that in order to get us into thriving states, a lot of times we can't really play it safe as it relates to like conventions. And what that means is, I'll just use the United States, for example, like the laws, labor laws, right? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a very pivotal law that prohibited discrimination for protected class in the workplace. And if we were in survival mode and fearful, we wouldn't have did that. The thing, you have to get into a certain state to actually evoke like positive change. And so I think lack of accountability is one. Leaders may not want to be the one taking that step out of the box because they're afraid of their job or whatever. They report to the board and and so they don't want to be accountable for something. So they say, okay, let's position this like we want to do more work in mindfulness at work. We're going to do more in well-being, but I don't want that to report. I don't want to have to say anything as the leader. So why don't you say it, vice president? Why don't you say it, director? Just do it for your staff because that's our culture. Well, is it your culture? Because what's going to happen is the director or vice president is going to talk about wellness and well-being, and then the CEO may make decisions that are counter to that. And so now people are like, no, that's not the culture. Our culture is I just got laid off before the holidays. That's the culture. I don't care what you did, during mental health month or whatever. Like, I don't care about that, And so I think a lack of accountability. I also think when you have individuals talking about trust but not doing the work to build trust, you see more so of talking about trust in the workplace a lot of times. And we talk about things, but we don't actually do the work because what we assume is trust is built linearly. First of all, we assume it's a linear thing. If I do something nice every day, that trust is going to make me build. We don't try to learn about why people aren't, trusting. We don't take time to learn about people. And so we just assume everybody's starting from square like one when I might start from -5 based on my last workplace. And you're not even giving me a time to trust you. You're not even doing the behaviors consistently for me to trust you. You can't just, you're nice when we're doing good economically as an organization, but then all of a sudden we are in an economic state as a company where thriving mode actually would help us get out of it. But yet you're exhibiting behaviors that are causing everybody and eliciting survival mode in everybody because everybody's stressed. No one's being creative. No one, everybody's fearful, what I'm saying? And so I think the moments where you need thriving, it seems like people don't create environments to elicit thriving. You can't just wait until you're in an economic boom as an organization and everybody, oh, now it's not toxic. No. It needs to not be toxic when things are going bad because when things are going bad for everybody, financially, so it's like everybody's stressed, no matter where you are on the org chart. That's actually the moment where we actually like would love to have a thriving environment because it could probably take us out of it. But we do the opposite.
One of the things that you mentioned there that really resonated with me was the accountability piece, right? And when you said in moments that matter, you need to be able to create those thriving environments, right? And encourage those behaviors. But one of the things that I noticed that organizations do a lot of times is if they have an extremely high performing leader who executes, hits the business targets and everything, yet they elicit toxic leadership behaviors, they're still kept because they deliver the business results, right? So when you're out there consulting and you're like, hey, actually, this leader right here is what is impacting the momentum you could have in terms of sustainable change and creating positive change. How do you begin to have those conversations with the organization in a disarming way so they're not like, hey, you're attacking my golden protected child right now?
Yeah, so like I said originally of how I like to build relationships, even as a consultant, I like to see what makes people tick. And one of the pieces that I gather when I have these conversations is a lot of emphasis on short-term orientation. And so I start to point out that first, and we start talking about that. And I share, long-term. What could be the impact of this, And so I know short term we're winning and things like that, but long term, what could be the impact? And people are honest about it. And I say, well, then I pivot into, well, what could we do? Because I know I know terminating this person's off the table because this is the golden goose. However, I get them to a standpoint of like, that's not on the table. What could we do though? And I say, what could we do? Meaning, I didn't say what should we do. What could we do? Could turns into a brainstorm. And so we start brainstorming and having the conversation of coulds. And they know that there are limits to the coulds. They know I'm not trying to get them to fire their golden goose as it relates to financial income. They know that I want to help them succeed in the long term, because I'm looking for their best interest. And so, because here's the thing, they got the short term, they feel like it's fine. So I don't go after short term stuff. I say long term, and we talk about that. And so anyway, that's the conversation that I typically have with firms as it relates to like that situation. It's worked like tremendous amount of times because I disarm the conversation. What's hard to do in that situation, what I know a lot of folks have tried to do, a lot of people I've coached, take this approach. They try to use empathy in the moment of like, oh, well, think about the people they're harming and all that. And I would love, that's great, but you're assuming rationality here. And what tends to happen is, yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I feel bad for the so-and-so. But they say, I feel also bad for my pocketbook. So the money, you know what I mean? The money's on their mind, right? And so that's why I'm asking them long term, what are the implications? We're typically talking about economic implications, as well as, social and, the human aspect of it. But I need to go after what they're valuing, because here's the thing. They're not doing something because of money. So why would you think they would do something because of people at the point? The money, money's on their mind, right? If it were like, oh, this person's treating people bad and stuff like that, something would have been happened. But it's not the human aspect that they're looking at. They're looking at the fact that this person's bringing in the financial money, So I have to go after what I know they care about in the moment, right? And we have a certain level of like care in certain times, and so I know their eggs are in the economic basket because that makes them look good. And so you want to go after ego here, and you want to address what makes them look good. And through that conversation, I want to keep them looking good long term. And so that's kind of how I'm framing the conversation.
I love the approach that you took where you're like, hey, let's brainstorm together. Because I think through that brainstorming process, you start to pick up on things where you're like, hey, this is the theme of what you truly care about versus being very prescriptive, right? And so for yourself, when you're having some of these conversations, because it doesn't come naturally to everyone to be able to really understand what makes someone tick, right? So if you could offer a leader, or even as an employee trying to figure out what makes my leader tick, what are maybe 1 to 3 questions that help you unpack that?
I might not have questions because I don't want to make this transactional. It's a mindset. I don't know what questions I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna be honest, like I have no idea. I just know that's what I really do care about, learning about what makes someone tick. And so it's really contextual based on the situation. And so it could be, why, if you knew about this employee that's been harming your culture and yet they bring in the money, why didn't anybody say anything to this person? Like, I'm asking these questions. Like, I'm looking at this, and why didn't anybody say anything to this person? Oh, we didn't feel like, we didn't feel like if we told this person, we felt like they would quit and go to a competitor. Why do you think that? Has it ever happened before? Have they ever said it? And I start asking these questions. Who has the strongest relationship with this person? I do. How do you feel, by not bringing stuff up to this person? How do you feel about that? Why? And so I'm starting to ask, I'm asking these questions because I'm really just like, here's the thing. So your mindset, first off, your mindset has to be, you want to know what makes people tick. Like, you got to have a mindset of like, you have a thirst for that knowledge. You just have a thirst for that knowledge. The key here is you can't judge people. No judgment. You're not doing it to judge them. Another key is you're also doing it in a way where, you can't solve anybody's problems. People can solve their own problems. And so you have to take the mindset of, I take the mindset of, I don't know anything. You know everything. And so as I'm coaching folks and as I'm talking to folks about this, and that's the reason why I'm wanting to know why people tick, because they're going to be the only ones who are going to be able to solve their immediate problem. And so I need to know their codex. I need to know their definition of the reality. I need to know how they see things. I need to know how they think about things. I need to know their fears. And so I'm digging deep to do all of that because I'm trying to uncover who they are and not put my solution on top of it. Because if my solution on top of it was going to be the answer, they could just go to Google and find, or Chat GPT or something. You can just go find a conventional way to do something. Like if it's basic knowledge, no, it's probably a lot of times people don't act because they don't have the resources to act. And they need to be able to do it in their brain and their behavior and their mindset and stuff like that. And so I try to learn, so essentially I try to learn what makes people tick because that helps me live more into their world and reality versus trying to impose my world and reality on people.
And I just had a light bulb moment as you shared that because I'm like, if you can't figure out what their reality is, the solution you give them will not work for their context, right?
Yeah, and it's never sustainable. I'm an executive coach, and I can tell you there's a big difference between coaching and giving advice, and so coaching is not advice, and so people want advice a lot, and I try to tell them like, yeah, I got all kinds of things I could tell you, and I put a caveat in there. Look, I'm going to tell you a few things that have worked for me or that have worked for others, and I ask them questions. And I tell them the solution, right? And I'm like, well, how does that hit you? What do you think about that? How can you use that? What can you take from that? I then pivot back into coaching because I don't want them to just operate in the standpoint of there's one like black and white truth, one black and white solution. Just because something worked for somebody else, you better believe that ain't gonna work for you. Like don't go into the thing like you could just copy something, because human nature, not everything is like that. And so I think we need to not that's the easy path of assuming that this one right way is the only way. And I like to embody the fact that life is all about the gray areas, and there are a multitude of ways to move and operate to solve problems. But to solve your problem that's right in front of you, it's going to take you.
Love that. And as we slowly wrap up our conversation, one of the questions I have for you is what do you think it takes to unleash the potential of individual or organizations?
It takes intention because, we talked about trust earlier. You gain trust in drops, you lose trust in gallons. And if you're not intentional about unleashing the power at the individual level or the organizational level, it only takes one thing to lose the trust you tried to build. And so it takes intention and it takes consistency, as it relates to like how we move and operate and navigate the world. And so when I say intention, that means know what you're doing, do it, tell people you're doing it, and ensure that what you're doing is embodied and permeates throughout the organization. So it can't just be, when we talk about treating people fairly, it can't just be HR talking about it, how we do it in our hiring process, and DEI talking about how we do it in our whatever they're doing. Like it can't just be like they may be doing training or they may be doing, sessions and stuff like that. It can't just be in like the areas we expect fairness to be in. If it's a fair organization, I need to feel that everywhere.
And I think that's where people sometimes miss the mark, as they think it all falls on one area or two sometimes, or it only falls on the leader when it's actually a collaborative approach, right? So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And my last question to you is, what is one thing that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
I am probably going to not say the traditional thing, but one thing I'm working on that I'm excited about is rest. And I'm always working on something. So I'm a classic, just what I own my own business. I'm a workaholic. So, but I'm working on rest and I'm really excited. 2024 for me, I'm looking for more opportunities to be intentional and purposeful about resting and about not working as much. And I'm excited about that because that's not something I naturally do. But I know it provides benefit to me. And yeah, I'm excited about it.
I think that's the first time I've ever had a guest say that rest was their key thing, and I respect that a lot about you, and just the approach that you take to work and the approach that you take to coaching leaders, and just even when you were answering the question of when I asked you what are 1 to 3 questions you'd ask, you talked about more of a mindset
Yes.
than actually like more of like actual questions asked. So then that becomes it's not sincere sometimes, right? When
Right.
we have those prescriptive questions. So thank you, Kevin, for your time. I really appreciate the knowledge and the tips that you shared with us today. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know. And I look forward to staying connected with you on the next episode. Till then, stay safe.